So good morning and welcome for the first topic we're handling this morning. So we're going to begin with rapid spanning tree protocol, a variation of STP, whose major objective was to improve the slow convergence speed of STP, as we are going to see here. So I'll read the foreword. The original STP standard was defined in 1998, for which a number of limitations were discovered. 1998 to 2020, how many years are those? 22? About 22 years, eh?
2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So you see, STP has been there for quite a while. So particularly in the time needed for convergence to occur, we saw that in STP, it takes about 30 to 50 seconds. Because of the message timer that has to expire, takes about 20 seconds. Because of the forward delay, listening to learning, 15 seconds, learning to forwarding, another 15 seconds, so 30 seconds. So it can take about 30 to 20 seconds, depending on the level of that particular switch on the inverted tree architecture. So in light of this, rapid spanning tree was introduced. The fundamental characteristics of RSTP are understood to follow the basis of STP. So just the same, just a few improvements. Therefore, the characteristic differences found within RSTP are the ones that are emphasized within this section. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to. Mr. Kichinda, please.
Yeah, you should be able to describe the characteristics associated with RSTP.
Yes.
And configure STP parameters.
Okay, sawa. Asante sana.
Yes.
So, as explained earlier, the problem with STP is the convergence speed. In case you have a link failure or you have the root bridge failure, then it takes about 30 to 50 seconds for it to come back up. Now, with RSTP, it's going to use real-time BPDUs with what we call the proposal and agreement bits that will allow immediate negotiation in case of failure. So we have the root bridge here. The root bridge will be sending the BPDUs after every 2 minutes. And these guys will also be sending BPDUs to the downstream switch without necessarily having to wait for a BPDU from the root. So in case there is a failure, it becomes very easy to detect the failure almost immediately. And we're also going to see how port states change in RSTP in order to ensure faster reconvergence. Okay. So these are the port roles in RSTP. So in RSTP, we have 4 port roles. Just like in STP, we have the designated ports that are used to forward BPDUs downstream. We have the root port. Then the root ports, as we know, are used to identify the shortest path to the root from a downstream switch. All ports on the root port are designated because they're used to forward BPDUs downstream to downstream switches. Then we have the alternate. We have the alternate ports in this particular RSTP, and we have a new port called the backup port. Now, backup port is used to provide backup to a designated port. Sorry, did I just misspell that? Used to provide backup to a designated port. On the other hand, an alternate port is used to provide backup to the root port. So we can see here just as a recap that this guy is the root. and therefore all the interfaces on the root port will be designated ports. Now these are downstream switches. Now, for example, here we have 2 ports that can be used. We looked at this scenario yesterday, and one has to be blocked. In this case, we are blocking this port. You know how we do that? By comparing the port IDs, that is the port priority and the port number. So we block that one. So the alternate port here is working as the backup to the root port. That means that if the root port goes down, then immediately the alternate port is going to be enabled. The alternate port is going to be enabled so that it can be the new root port. So that explains what I've just jotted down here, that the alternate port is the backup to the root port. Okay, now let's look at the backup port. Let's look at the backup port. So here, this switch is connected to another switch here using a redundant link, 2 redundant links. So, of course, one of them will be a designated port in order to forward BPDUs to the, to this lower switch. Yes, Nick?
For a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Can we have a redundancy with more than 2 links?
Yes. You can, but most of the time it's not necessary. But we are going to learn about what is called Ethernet trunking, And yes. You can see that we can be able to combine multiple physical links into a single logical link. So we can still have more than 1 link. When we have more than 1 link again, all the others are going to be blocked. So only one is going to really work. Okay. So thank you for that question. So so what I was saying is this: in case this designated port goes down, then the backup port will become the new designated. It will become the new designated port in order to forward BPDUs to the downstream switches. So that's why we say that the backup port is the backup to the designated port. So unlike in STP where we have 3 port roles, please remember that in RSTP we have 4 port roles. Okay, now actually they're not 4. Oh, sorry, they're not 4, they're actually 5. Hey, so let me now do it again. So 5 RSTP port roles. So I talked of the root port, the designated port. Number 3, we have what we call the root designated alternate port. And now the new ports that were introduced in RSTP are the backup port and what we call the edge port, Now generally, the switch, the main purpose of the switch most of the time is to connect to the end devices. End devices do not need to participate in STP or RSTP, in RSTP. So we configure certain ports in the switch as edge ports. And their purpose is simply to forward data and not to receive BPDUs. So edge ports do not receive BPDUs and they can instantly forward data. So instantly forward data means edge ports can transit from the disabled state or from the blocked state directly to the forward state without taking into account the forward delay. So we don't have to wait for learning to listening. No. So it can really transit that fast. And that is one of the way in which we improve RSTP network convergence. So that's the 5th port role. So don't forget that. Now, sometimes we're going to see how this can be handled, but sometimes you can have a hacker sending what you call a bogus BPDU to an edge port. So you have a hacker here who understands the format of a BPDU. He or she can create a fake BPDU and send it to your edge port. Once that happens, as we know, STP and RSTP are preemptive in nature. So if the bogus BPDU they send has a better bridge ID, then they're going to force election to occur again, which can cause what we call network flapping. So it can cause some downtime because of the transition of the port states. So we're going to see how to deal with that particular problem, but that is one way in which hackers can actually attack your network. Now, unlike in STP, where we have 5 port states, in RSTP, we only have 3 port states: discarding, learning, and forwarding. So you need to know some of the port role, some of the ports that can be on each of the states. So when a port is disabled, well, that is, it has been shut down or it has not been interconnected to another end device or another switch, we call it disabled. It will be in discarding state. So in discarding state, you cannot forward user traffic, you cannot learn MAC addresses. Then alternate and backup ports, because they're both backup ports, they will always be in discarding state. Again, in discarding state, you cannot forward data or learn MAC addresses. But when you're an alternate or backup port, you can receive BPDUs in order to monitor the RSTP network. Then we have the root port and the designated port can also be on discarding state, as we are going to see in the next few slides. Then the only ports that can be on learning and forwarding state are the root port and the designated port. So in learning, you cannot forward user data, but you can learn MAC addresses. And of course, you can receive RSTP BPDUs. In forwarding, now you can forward user data, and you can also receive BPDUs and learn MAC addresses. So those are the 3 things that you're supposed to know. Again, just as a reminder, so number 1, can you be able to learn MAC addresses in order to prevent MAC address table instability? Number 2, can you be able to forward user data? Number 3, can you be able to receive BPDUs, BPDUs, like that? Can you be able to receive a BPDU? So for example, the edge port cannot receive BPDU, but an alternate and backup port, even though they're on discarding state, they can be able to receive BPDU. So those are some of the things you're supposed to know in relation to the state and the particular port role that a port is in at any given time. So yesterday we looked at these particular fields for an STP BPDU. Now here we are looking at what we call an Arrestee BPDU. So the BPDU in RSTP is normally referred to as a rapid spanning tree. Rapid spanning tree bridge protocol data unit. or Arrestee BPDU. So that is it. Now, yesterday, we didn't talk about the flags field. We didn't talk about the flags field, but at some point I tried to go back in order to see whether in that particular header, I could see these two bits. Do you still remember these two bits? The TC and the TCA? Anyone? What does the TC and TCA stand for? Someone? Yes or you? Oyo, I can't hear you. Did you raise your hand, Oyo? Okay. So yesterday we looked at these two when we were learning STP, topology change and topology change notification. Topology change and topology change notification. So in STP, this flags field is there, but it does not make use of these other fields. It only makes use of the TC and the TCA fields. Topology change, bit will be set to 1 when a downstream device wants to notify the root bridge of a failure. Topology change notification will be set to 1 when the root bridge wants to notify the downstream switches so that they can be able to reset their MAC address table. Now, RSTP makes use of this particular. Oyo, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I'm asking.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead. We can.
I'm asking.
Yes.
Is a TCA topology change acknowledgement or notification?
Acknowledgement, I'm sorry. Wow. Acknowledgement. Sorry. I made that mistake. Topology change acknowledgement. Okay. Thank you for that. So, the Arrestee BPDU makes use of these other flags, including the agreement and the proposal flag. So the proposal will be set to 1 if the BPDU, if the Arrestee BPDU is a proposal. It will be set to, otherwise it will be 0. This one will be set to 1 if the Arrestee BPDU is an agreement. Otherwise it will be 0. The other thing that will be there is these 2 bits that are used to identify the port roll. So for example, when the port roll is unknown, then these 2 bits are gonna be 0, 0. When the port roll is either alternate or backup, it will be 0, 1. When the port roll is a root port, then it will be 1, 0. And when the port roll is 1, 1, then it will be a designated port. So that is what that really is. Then here, the state. If the port is on the forwarding state, this bit will be set to 1, otherwise it will be 0. If the port, on the other hand, is in the learning state, this field will be set to 1, otherwise it will be a 0. So new capabilities such as agreement and proposal are introduced as part of RSTP in order to ensure that we have a fast convergence. It is important to note that these fields were not being used with STP, but now we are using them in order to improve the convergence speed. Okay. So in STP, when the topology becomes stable, that is, after election is done and the port roles are identified, we wait for the BPDU to be coming from the root bridge at hello time interval, which is 2 seconds. So the root bridge will be sending hello, will be sending BPDUs in STP after every 2 seconds. Then when we receive the BPDU, we create our own. It takes a maximum of 1 second, and we send it down to the downstream switches. Now, that is quite different in RSTP, because in RSTP, after the topology becomes stable, an unroot bridge will also send configuration BPDUs at hello intervals, regardless of whether it has received a configuration BPDU sent from the bridge, from the root bridge. So what does that mean? Let's assume that switch A here is the root bridge. So in STP, this guy has to send to this guy, then this guy will generate another one and send downwards. So that is not the case here. Okay, this one is still sending, but even when this one is not sending, this one is still generating its own Arrestee BPDUs and sending to downstream switches. So that ensures that in case there is a failure anywhere within a switch, whether a link failure or the hardware failure of the switch, it becomes easy and very fast to detect that failure. So what is the RSTP convergence process? Just like in STP, all RSTP enabled switches begin as the root and send rapid spanning tree bridge protocol data units. So everyone sends a BPDU saying, hey, I am the root. When they are doing that, all the ports are set to a designated role and a discarding state. So that's important. That is important, that as we are sending BPDUs saying that we are the root, all our ports are going to be on a designated role and discarding state. Discarding state meaning we cannot learn MAC addresses, we cannot forward user traffic. We can only receive and process Arrestee BPDUs. So it's important that you understand that. Now, what follows is this, what we call the Arrestee BPDU proposal. The proposal. So with the proposal, proposals are sent in Arrestee BPDU during the root election. A switch will ignore a proposal if it has a better bridge ID. If it has a better bridge ID. So let's check, for example. So if switch A has a better bridge ID compared to switch B, when switch A receives this BPDU from switch B saying I'm the president, it will simply ignore it because it will see I have a better bridge ID than this guy. So ignore. Otherwise, if I receive the Arrestee BPDU and it has a better bridge ID, then I'm going to process it. By processing it means I'm going to stop sending my own Arrestee BPDU, then I'm going to send an acknowledgement So the acknowledgement bit is going to be set to 1, and the proposal bit is also going to be set to 1. So let me just go to the next one here. So this is what I'm saying. Upon receiving a superior BPDU, switch B will cease to send Arrestee BPDU containing proposals and begin to synchronize. So synchronization is determining after receiving a superior BPDU, after getting the superior BPDU, the first thing you must do is to set all the downstream designated ports to discarding. So that is what happens during the synchronization process. So we've received a superior BPDU from switch A. So what we do is that all the downstream ports, we set them to discarding state. We set them to a discarding state. So those are designated ports. However, if we have an alternate port or an edge port, the port role of the edge port or the alternate port will remain unchanged. So for example, if we have a port that is connecting to an end device here, this port role, which will be forwarding, because if it's an edge port, it will be forwarding, it will not be blocked. Remember we said that when the Arrestee convergence process begins, when it begins, every switch will set its port roles to designated D, but only on links that are interconnected to switches and not really to edge ports, because edge ports cannot change. Okay. So from here, once all downstream and edge designated ports have been blocked, switch B will send an agreement with the Arrestee BPDU. It will send an agreement. So here we are just saying, hey, you are better than me. So we set the agreement here. We set this agreement bit to 1 when we are replying to switch B. The agreement bit, we set it to 1. Okay. And at this point, other than setting the agreement bit to 1, we also identify a port role, because that particular port, then we are going to set it to the port role of the root. Because if this guy is superior than me, then this is the link that is closest to this guy. So I'm going to set that port role to the root. And therefore, again, here on the Arrestee BPDU, we are going to set the port role, this port role here. So let me just clear that. This port role here, we are going to set it to 10, because that is the root port. So other than setting the agreement bit, we're also going to set the port role bit. Okay. So after you are done, after that particular conversation is done between switch A and switch B, this port here, the downstream port that had been blocked, is going to be unblocked. And again, we are going to have the proposal and agreement between switch B and switch C. The same way we had a proposal and agreement. So proposal is we both send each other saying, hey, I'm the president. Then we will compare our own bridge IDs, and if you're better, then you'll stop sending, and I'll send you a proposal again. Then you'll send an agreement. So that is what we call a proposal and agreement. So we'll also have the same process happen between these two switches, and that is how it happens between all the switches until a root port is actually identified. A root bridge rather. So how does RSTP handle failure, whether it's a link failure or a root failure? So just like in STP, when you don't receive Arrestee BPDUs, when you don't receive Arrestee BPDUs from an uplink device, from an upstream device, then it means that we either have a link or a device failure. So how long does it take? As we said in Arrestee, every switch generates its own BPDUs and send it downstream after every 2 seconds based on the hello timer. Now, if you miss an update within 3 consecutive hello timers, so that's about 6 seconds, you don't get an Arrestee BPDU from an upstream device, then it means we either have a link or device failure. So once that happens, then we need to begin the proposal and agreement process between us. So anytime there's a link failure, we begin the proposal and agreement. So unlike in STP, you remember in STP, it is important to mention this. In STP, we were waiting for the max age to expire. The max age was, at maximum, it could take 20 seconds, but really, we were looking at the message age. Message age, when it's greater than the maximum age, then we know that we have lost the upstream device. But here, we don't wait for 20 seconds or anything less than that. We only wait for 6 seconds, 3 consecutive. If we miss 3 consecutive hello, hello timer, so that is 6 seconds. If we don't get, because the hello timer is 2 seconds, so if we don't get a BPDU within 6 seconds, we begin the proposal and agreement between the switches. Okay. Oh, what just happened? Are you still able to see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Tulikuwa tumefika wapi? Convergence. Okay. Topology change process. Topology change process. The topology change process, so we need to notify the upstream devices of a link or a device failure so that we can avoid MAC address table instability. So that you can avoid MAC address table instability. So what happens is when we have a link or device failure, as we are exchanging the agreement and the proposals, we will set the topology change bit to 1. We will set it to 1 so that we can notify the upstream switches to flash all the ports except the port on which the Arrestee BPDU was received. So by flashing, it means we remove the entries of those ports in our MAC address table. So in this particular example, a failure has occurred between switch A and switch C within this link here. So once a failure occurs here, this guy is gonna wait for a maximum of 6 seconds. If they don't receive any BPDU from that, then they're going to first of all change the port role, because now this was the root port, but now they're going to change the root port. They're going to change this, which was the alternate port, into a root port, and they'll begin sending an Arrestee BPDU with the proposal bit set to 1. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what was I saying? So in this Arrestee BPDU, the TC bit, topology change bit, will also be set to 1, and the agreement bit will be set to 1. So if this guy receives it, they are going to forward it upstream, but as they forward it upstream, they are going to delete the entry of this particular interface on its MAC address table, but not the entry of this interface. So that's what we're saying here. During the sending of an agreement, addresses are flashed for all ports except the port on which the Arrestee BPDU was received. So similarly, a switch A will also flash for this port marked with a red. Switch C will also flash any entry of that particular port, because these two ports have failed. So when they fail, in fact, switch C will immediately flash it from the MAC address table. Similarly, switch A will also do that. So that is how the topology change is actually handled within an RSTP topology. Now, let's look at STP interoperation. In technology, we normally talk of backward compatibility. That is, a newer technology can be able to work with an older technology. Now, the strategy with RSTP in terms of backward compatibility and working with STP is that if in an RSTP network, a new switch is added whose mode of operation is STP, then all the other switches are going to revert back to using STP. You see here, in this example, switch A and switch B were using RSTP. And now, when we introduce switch C and it's using STP, they now have to send STP BPDUs and not Arrestee BPDUs. So that is how STP and RSTP interoperate. So the command for setting the mode is what we looked at yesterday. So on system view, we do STP space mode, then we choose RSTP. Again, just to repeat, by default, Huawei switches uses MSTP, multiple spanning tree. But when you're doing the lab for RSTP, you need to change the mode to RSTP. When you're doing the lab for STP, you need to change the mode to STP. So once you change the mode to RSTP using that command, then the switches will begin to generate Arrestee BPDUs, and the proposal and agreement process will ensue. So we can always confirm the mode that we've just set by using the command display STP. So we can see that this is our bridge ID. We can see the different timers for that particular bridge. You can also see the root bridge ID. Sorry, the root bridge ID here. Excuse me. And most importantly, we can see the mode. I was looking for this. Then we are generally required to set interfaces that connect to end devices as edge ports. Why? So that they can transit from the disabled or blocking state directly to forwarding state immediately without any delay. So to do that, we use the command on that particular interface. So for example, host A here is interconnected to this interface G003, sorry. So we go into that interface, then we use the command STP edged-port enable. We use that command. So when we press enter, then that particular port is now going to be treated as an edge port, and it's not going to receive any BPDUs or process any BPDUs. It is important to note that by default, ports on the S5700 and even the current Huawei switches are set as non-edge ports. So if you want them to become an edge port, you have to configure. So you can either do one by one, or you can configure all of them to be edged ports using this command on system view. So for example, if this is an access switch, and it's a 24-port switch, so maybe you're just using 2 ports to interconnect to switches, but the remaining ports, 22 ports, are used to connect to the end devices. So it will be easier not to enable port by port for all the 22 ports to enable them to become edge ports. So what you do, just enable all the ports, all the 24 to become edge ports. Then now you can configure these 2 ports as non-edge ports. So it becomes a little bit easier for you to do that. But as it has been noted here, care should be taken with this command to avoid STP loops, because if you configure a port that is interconnecting to a switch as an edge port, you're going to result into a loop, because edge ports can forward data, they can learn MAC address at any time. So care should be taken when you're using that command. Then we have what we call BPDU protection. You remember I gave you an example that that a hacker who's connected to your network can send a bogus BPDU to an edge port. So this particular command that is done on the system view, on the global switch, so you're not going to do it on a particular interface, but on the global, STP BPDU-protection. When you use that command, it will prevent malicious injection of BPDU into RSTP. Because if a hacker sends a BPDU that has a better bridge ID, it's going to cause network flapping. We are going to have elections happening again, and we are going to have the network being down for a few seconds. So to avoid that, you configure edge ports with STP BPDU protection. Now, once that is enabled, anytime an edge port receives a BPDU, that particular edge port is going to be blocked. It's going to be shut down. So it will do 2 things. You receive a bogus BPDU, number 1, shut down the edge port. Number 2, notify the network management system. So you'll have a network management system for monitoring the network as a network engineer. So it will notify you that someone is trying to attack your network by sending bogus BPDUs at interface G0/0/3. Now, once the port has been shut down, it can only be what is the opposite of shutdown? It can only be put on manually by you, the network admin. So that is what we call BPDU protection. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at loop protection. Now, as we said earlier, RSTP, just within 6 seconds, if we don't receive a BPDU from an upstream switch, we will assume immediately that that particular link is down, or the root, or that particular device is down in just about 6 seconds, 3 consecutive hello time. Now, once that happens, what do? We know that the alternate here is the backup to the root. So we will make this our new root and enable it. Now, once we do that, this particular root port will become a designated port. Now, the problem is sometimes we can actually have what we call congestion. 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 Is that the correct spelling? Have I gotten it right?
It has a G.
Yeah.
G.
Oh, ni G. Thank you. Okay. Congestion. Now, when we have congestion, it causes delays in our network. So sometimes inaweza kuwa tu this interface has so many packets to process or frames, and therefore we have a delay that extends beyond the 6 seconds. So it's not like the link is down or the device is down, and therefore when this guy now, when the congestion will ease and this guy will be able to forward the BPDU, are you seeing that now we are going to have a loop? Why? Because we have enabled this interface and we've also enabled this interface. The alternate port is now our root port. So we are going to have a loop. So to avoid that, we use this feature called STP loop protection. STP loop protection. We use it specifically on the root port. So on switch C, we go into that interface and we use the command STP loop protection. So after the loop protection function is enabled, the root port is blocked if it cannot receive BPDU from the upstream switch. So it's blocked completely. So as we enable the alternate and make it our new route, we have blocked the previous route and it cannot be able to forward user traffic or LAN MAC addresses. So that is what we call RSTP loop protection. So again, with the command display STP, then on a particular interface, the name of a particular interface and number, we can see a few things about the port. Number one, we can see the port state. For example, this port is on forwarding state. We can also see the port role. You remember the port priority? By default, it's 128, and it's used to determine a route or an alternate port when we have two links that offer the same RPC to the route bridge. Okay, but most importantly, here you can see that indeed we've enabled loop protection. So protection type, loop. You can also see the port STP mode is RSTP. And you can see that the route bridge ID is that, while the route port ID is that. So the route port ID is actually the port priority together with the port number. So 128.1. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Anyone with a question? Anyone with a question on this one? Okay, can someone try and answer this question, please? What is the purpose of the sync that occurs during the RSTP proposal and agreement process? Synchronization process. What are we doing when we are doing the synchronization process? Okay, so take time and read the answer below this slide. If you don't understand it, you can let us know in the beginning of the next topic. Asanteni sana.